I already made a video where I talked about which perks you should pick for the best results with my initial impressions shortly after the perk update dropped, but today, by popular demand, I'm going to be taking a different approach and ranking every single perk on its own merits. Instead of looking at synergies or specific playstyles, we're evaluating each perk based on its overall impact, consistency, and value in all situations. From must picks to the ones that need to be reworked completely, I'm looking at all 172 of them. I've decided to keep it simple with 4 tiers. The highest, broken, is obvious. These are the perks that are so strong that they're basically your power spikes. When you finally reach them, it changes the value your hero is going to get drastically and are real nerf contenders. A tier are super solid perks that fit into most playstyles and are just slightly weaker than the broken ones. If they got a bit stronger, they'd be nerf contenders too. Next is mid tier, which is exactly as it sounds, just for the middling ones. And then lastly, we have bad. These perks are just super underwhelming, and if you can pick something else, you almost always should. Let me know in the comments if you enjoy the video and if there are any takes I have that you disagree with. I hope you enjoy the video, and if you do, please remember to like and subscribe for more similar content. Peace out. Alright, first off we have Bunny Stomp, which makes it so that call mech's damage radius is increased by 50%. This one's pretty middling, to be honest. Going for remech kills is pretty rare and inconsistent. And most of the time, if you actually do get them off, it's because the other team made a mistake, not because you did anything super amazing. So I'm going to put this one in mid. Next up, we have Ejection Suit, which makes it so that you get 75 temporary overhealth whenever you come out of your mech. This counts either when you bomb or when you get demeched, and that makes it pretty crazy, to be honest. I don't think I'm going to put it in broken, because I don't think it necessarily needs a nerf, but 75 overhealth when a lot of the time when you're remeching, it's like when you're kind of in the midst of the middle of the battle, it really makes it a lot more consistent for you to actually get in as long as you're staying mindful of the stuns. So I'm definitely going to put this one in A tier. Shield system turns 150 of your health to shields and makes it so that defense matrix restores shields based on 25% of its damage absorbed. While it's not a ton of healing, it's not insignificant too, and the shields is just a nice bonus. So I'm going to put this one in A tier as well, just because it's anything that makes D.Va tankier and harder to kill can be pretty strong. Honestly, I'm going to put heavy rockets into bad tier. It makes it so that your missiles are swapped for heavy rockets, which fire fewer projectiles with increased damage and explosion size. Because you're shooting like stronger rockets, if you miss one, it just becomes even worse. Where like when you're shooting a bunch of micro missiles, you know, miss a couple, it's not the end of the world. But missing even one of the heavy rockets really neuters your damage output. So for that reason, I'm gonna put it in bad. Next, we're going to Doomfist, and we're gonna look at 1-2, which makes it so when you hit an enemy with your rocket punch, it reloads all your hand cannon ammo. It's okay. It's not awful. A lot of the time when you're punching in, you're gonna have been reloaded anyway, so it doesn't make too big of a difference. There are definitely times where you're in the midst of things and getting all of your ammo back instantly can be pretty strong, you know, when you want to be punching in anyway, right? So it's kind of just a bonus. Next up, we have Survival of the Fittest, making it so the best defense, which is his passive, grants 25 overhealth from eliminations, and its max overhealth is increased by 50. This one might not seem super crazy because 25 overhealth for getting the limb, you know, you're already in an advantage when you get a limb, so is 25 overhealth really going to help you very much? But the second part of it is where it really shines. It increases his max overhealth by 50. This is essentially a 50 HP buff if you're using your abilities well, because the way the passive works, the best defense, anytime you hit a skill on a person, you get that extra HP. So this just increases that cap by 50, so like I said, it's essentially a 50 HP buff. So this one's pretty crazy. I'm honestly putting this one in broken. So for his first major perk, Seismic Empowerment, it makes it so that hitting 3 or more enemies with Seismic Slam empowers Rocket Punch. I honestly overrated this one pretty heavy. There are definitely compositions where it's really going to be strong, especially if, you know, you're playing against a brawl comp where the enemy team is going to be stacked. But in most compositions in Overwatch, hitting 3 people with a slam is pretty inconsistent, and slamming in and, you know, not knowing whether or not you're going to have an empowered punch to follow it up, it makes it so that there aren't a lot of situations where this is going to be super strong. If we end up going back to 6v6 and this perk ends up not being changed, I'm going to guarantee that we're going to have a Doomfist meta. But, you know, for the current iteration of the game, this one is, I overrated it a lot, so I'm going to put it in mid. So similarly to me overrating Seismic Empowerment, I really kind of underrated Power Matrix. This makes it so the power block absorbs projectiles for the first second of its duration. This isn't necessarily amazing. Like, yeah, you can eat a sleep dart, which is super strong, but the thing that makes this really strong is that, blocking absorbs a percentage of your damage, but when you have power block, it absorbs it entirely, right? So it basically means you need less damage absorbed or you need to take less damage to get your powered up punch than you do if you have just the normal block. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in A tier. Next up, we have Hazard. His first minor perk off the top makes it so that Violent Leap Slash deals 30% more damage to enemies above 250 health. Again, it's just not that amazing. A lot of the time when you go for your slash on characters, you're going to want to be comboing it with a shot, and a lot of the times that shot is going to actually take them under that 250 HP threshold, so you're not really going to get very much value out of it. So I think this one's pretty overrated and just not super useful, so I'm frankly going to put it in bad. Reconstitution makes it so that Jagged Wall hits charge Spike Guard with 25 energy up to 50 extra. It's not super strong, but when you consider the flow of Hazard's kit and the fact that you want to be engaging when you use your wall, the way you just got to think of it is like if someone walks into my wall, that's just even more time that I can hold right click and get that damage resistance more than anything. So I'll put Reconstitution and I'll put it in mid. Anarchic Zeal makes it so that Spiked Guard spikes gain 25% lifesteal, which is a pretty substantial amount of HP when you consider you're also taking, that much less damage because of the damage resist that this provides, right? The spikes can also hit as many people as are in front of you at a time, so this really can add up quite a bit, so I'm still putting this one in A tier. Deep Leap is Hazard's other major perk, and it makes it so Violent Leap's range is increased by 20%. This is another one that I underrated greatly. I'm going to put it in A tier just because it really changes from how far you can engage on people, and the important thing to note with his leap is that the cooldown actually starts when you activate the skill. So a lot of the time if you go a really long distance or you even go up and then down, a lot of the time by the time you land and you slash someone, it's going to only be like 2 or 3 seconds away from being able to use it again, which can really make for some devastating burst damage combos. Next up, we have Junker Queen, and we're starting with Rending Recall, which makes it so that recalling Jagged Blade from a stuck target refreshes its wounds. This one, it's pretty middling. A lot of the time, this is only going to be super duper valuable when you have your knife inside of a tank, because a lot of the time when you knife a squishy, you pretty much want to pull it back immediately. That way you can pull them into you and try to get the burst damage with your shotgun or, the swing of your Carnage, right? So the only time you're getting a ton of value out of this is when you have it in a tank and you leave it in the full distance or full duration, and then you pull it out the end to reset the wound anyway. But a lot of the time, you just want to pull it back immediately to displace them, and so that you can actually have your knife in your hand to start spamming melees to get those bleeds going anyway. So we're just going to put it in mid. Battle Shout makes it so that your commanding shout fully reloads your scattergun and increases the allied reload speed by 50%. This is another perk that I would say I overrated pretty heavily, just because 95% of the time when you engage as Queen, you're going to be engaging with your shouts at the beginning of the fight. So a lot of the time you're not even gonna have used any of your ammo, so you're not really gonna get very much value out of it. And the increased allied reload speed is, it's definitely not useful, but it's not as strong as I originally interpreted it to be. So we're gonna put this one in mid. Next up, we have Queen's first major perk, Deep Wounds, which makes it so that when you hit people with your scattergun, it extends the wound duration on those enemies by 0.5 seconds. This isn't insignificant, but in the grand scheme of things, so much of Queen's kit revolves around just like kind of spamming your wounds. So if you're in a situation where your only way to extend the wounds isn't necessarily to hit more, melees or your Carnage swings, but just to use your gun, that you kind of lose some of the value of it. So while I don't think this perk's bad, I don't think it's great either. So I'm also going to put that one in mid. Queen's last perk makes it so that Carnage's impact damage gains 100% lifesteal. This is the perk. This perk is so powerful because not only do you have to consider that this makes it so the wound is more lifesteal, Carnage also has the mechanic where every enemy you hit reduces the cooldown of it by 2 seconds. So a lot of the time you're going to be hitting, 2 different people with it, which is going to reduce the cooldown by 4 seconds, which just means you can use this even more often. So when you get this major perk, it really, really increases her value and her, just her lifesteal, so that she can stay in fights for longer, because this ability is just so powerful when you change this number this high. So I'm going to put this one in broken. Kinetic Bandolier makes it so that Overrun reloads up to 150 ammo while charging. This one's kind of middling. A lot of the time, you're not going to be charging max distance anyway, and a lot of the time you're going to be playing a corner, so it's going to be pretty easy to reload before you actually engage. So most of the time when you engage, you're going to have full ammo anyway. So I'm going to just put this one down here in mid. 2 hearts makes it so while you're on an objective, Mauga counts as 2 heroes and regenerates 20 health per second. The first part of this, counting as 2 heroes, is pretty middling. A lot of the time it doesn't really matter too much because you get such diminishing returns when you have more than one person on cart anyway. But the big part of this is the 20 health per second, which might seem insignificant, but you also have to consider how much lifesteal he's getting from his abilities and how much HP he's building from his passive and how much his supports are healing. So it just adds to that. An extra 20 health per second, as long as you make sure you're fighting on the objectives, this is pretty significant, honestly. So we're gonna put 2 hearts in A tier. Mauga's first major perk, Firewalker, makes it so that Overrun ignites enemies hit. And this one's pretty crazy. You have to consider that a lot of the time when you run onto an enemy and you slam them, once you are able to start shooting again, it's going to take a few bullets to ignite them, which lowers your DPS because you aren't going to be immediately critting them. But this makes it so that they're already going to be lit. So the second you start shooting, they're already going to be taking the crits, which is pretty substantial, right? It's also makes your stomp just have like basically a AoE DOT, which is just kind of wild. So for that reason, I'm honestly gonna put Firewalker. I'm gonna put it in broken. I think it's probably the lower end of broken, but putting it in the same tier as 2 hearts felt a little weird, so we'll put it in broken. Combat Fuel makes it so that critical hits grant Mauga 2 temporary overhealth on Cardiac Overdrive's next use, up to 100 overhealth. When you consider how easy it is for Mauga to get critical hits with, the way the fire and his gun works, this basically just means whenever you use Cardiac Overdrive, you're going to get another 100 overhealth, which is pretty substantial, especially consider that the character's so much about like life stealing. So for that reason, I will probably put Combat Fuel in. Okay, Combat Fuel's not on the tier list. We're gonna imagine it's right here in A tier. Oh wait, it's okay. I don't know when that happened. It's in A tier. Yay! Next up, we have Orisa, and her first minor perk makes it so that critical hits from your primary fire refund heat. This one's pretty strong. It's pretty matchup dependent because a lot of the time as Orisa, you don't want to find yourself just standing there and shooting the tank. You want to be running under the squishies and trying to, disrupt the backline and look for the burst damage with your javelin ability. So this one's only strong in some specific matchups. So for that reason, I'm probably just gonna put it in mid tier, just because it's so against what Orisa wants to be doing. You don't want to just be standing there and shooting the tank as Orisa, but it's definitely not bad. It's probably towards the higher end of mid. Next up, we have Fleeting Bulwark, which makes it so that Fortify briefly grants an additional 100% decaying overhealth when activated, which, frankly, this is pretty crazy for a minor perk. This is 100 extra HP that you also have to consider that it happens when you use Fortify, which means it's essentially more than 100 health because it's you're getting the damage resist and not taking the headshots. So having this as a minor perk really just makes Orisa that much tankier and just makes Fortify, which is already a really strong ability, that much stronger, and Orisa just that much harder to kill. We're gonna put this one in A tier. Orisa's first major perk, Charged Javelin, makes it so that the energy javelin can be charged to increase projectile speed and knockback, which makes it also pierce enemies at full power. This one's kind of weird because it kind of messes with your muscle memory a lot and makes it a little bit more awkward to know how fast your javelin's going to go, which makes it harder to aim like consistently. The pierce is strong, but I find there's not that many situations where the enemies are super stacked up, so I don't find myself getting value out of it a ton. But it can be fun, and if you get used to the faster projectile speed, it definitely will make it easier to hit. So honestly, I'm gonna put this one in mid just because, like I say, it messes with your muscle memory a lot. And lastly, we have Protective Barrier, which replaces Javelin Spin with a barrier. I think this perk it's fun and it's as fun as a shield can be, and it's nostalgic, which is cool. But at the end of the day, the way I look at this perk is that you're replacing an insanely strong ability in Javelin Spin with another strong ability, right? Where most of the major perks just straight buff you. So this kind of just feels like it's moving your power from one ability to another. And sure, the shield is good against things that are, consistently countering Orisa. But at the end of the day, like, losing your javelin spin and it's so integral to your kit and how you want to actually be playing Orisa. So I think this one's pretty overrated for that reason. I'm gonna put it in mid as well. Next up, we have Ramatra and Void Surge, which makes it so the Void Accelerator periodically releases a burst of 6 additional projectiles during continuous fire. The way the projectiles come out, it's kind of like a shotgun blast. So a lot of the time, that's really only going to be super useful when you're just spamming tanks. Which, you know, don't get me wrong, it's definitely helpful and it increases your damage output. But by the time someone's actually in your face and you're getting a lot of value out of the shotgun burst, you'd rather just be using your Nemesis form and punching them anyway, because it's just going to be higher DPS anyway. So I'm gonna put this one in mid because, like I said, a lot of the time when you're poking, you know, a shotgun burst isn't going to help you very much because you're poking them from a range, right? Prolonged Barrier was recently buffed to make it so that the duration and the size is increased by 25%. That makes this ability a lot stronger. The size is pretty, you know, the 25% bonus size it's pretty big. The duration, you know, still isn't very massive, but the size makes a pretty big difference. So I'm gonna put this one. I'm probably still gonna put it in mid, but it was a pretty substantial buff, so it definitely made this ability stronger. Next up, for Ramatra's first major perk, we have Nanite Repair, which makes it so that Ramatra is healed for 50 health per second while within his Ravenous Vortex. I still think this perk is crazy. You will have to consider that when you're using this and you're getting that healing, you're also often going to be comboing it either with your ultimate ability or with just Nemesis form, which means you can just hold block. So that 50, you know, 150 total HP, if you stay in it for the full 3-second duration, is essentially much more because of the damage reduction that the block on Nemesis form provides. So I think this I think this perk is super duper strong. We're going to put this one in A tier for sure. And lastly, for Ramatra, we have Vengeful Vortex, which makes it so that while the Vortex is airborne, you can press E a second time to detonate it, which deals 50 burst damage and pulls enemies downwards. This perk I definitely underrated in my last video. I did not realize that when you pull them downwards, it really stops their movement basically entirely for a second, because the way the ability works normally, a lot of the time they just get slowed and they just walk out of it, where this one really, it almost roots them for a moment, which is, you know, and that's not even talking about the burst damage potential. So Vengeful Vortex is honestly really strong and really changes the way Ramatra can engage with his E and then following it up with instantly going into Nemesis mode and instantly starting to punch the enemies. It really honestly gives Ramatra quite a bit of burst damage. So I think this one's, I'm going to put it in broken, frankly. Next up, we have poor Reinhardt. Crusader's Resolve minor perk makes it so that when you're using Barrier Field, your passive health regeneration triggers 75% sooner. This isn't insignificant. You do have to consider that tank's passive health regen is stronger than DPS's and supports, since it is percentage based HP. So that is something to note. And a lot of, you know, 75% sooner, that is a lot faster than normal. So if you're playing against a comp that isn't going to have a lot of angles on you and isn't going to be able to shoot you through the shield or behind the shield, the passive regen can actually trigger pretty fast. So for that reason, we'll put it in mid. It's kind of generous, but it's not an insignificant amount of HP regen that it provides you. Fiery Uptake makes it so that Barrier Field is healed for 100% of Fire Strike's damage dealt. This is another perk that's it's pretty middling. It's a little bit stronger when you consider the fact that Fire Strike is going to be piercing people, and if they're lined up, a lot of the time you can hit 2 or even 3 enemies sometimes pretty consistently, which is not going to be an insignificant amount of shield recharge. But considering Reinhardt, you know, he wants to really be involved and be swinging that hammer around, a lot of the time, you know, you're not going to want to like hit someone with a hammer, fire strike, and then immediately put your shield up, right? A lot of the time you're going to want to push that pressure that you put out. So it's not bad, but it's not super great either. So we're going to put it in mid. Reinhardt's first major perk, Shield Slam, makes it so that when Barrier is active, you have primary fire to damage and knock back enemies with a small shield, basically shield bash, right? It doesn't stun, and you're not going to be like comboing with Earth Shatter or anything, so it's really quite underwhelming for a major perk. I'm just gonna put this one straight up in bad. The range that he moves when he shield slams too, he takes like a step, right? It's really quite underwhelming. Crushing Victory makes it so that the charge damage grants temporary overhealth for 50% of the damage dealt. That this kind of just makes him a little bit tankier when you charge in, which is, it's definitely the time when he needs that HP the most, because when you charge in, you're going to be getting quite aggressive, right? But at the end of the day, for a major perk, this little bit of an extra HP, it ends up being quite irrelevant, because frankly, a lot of the time, by the time you get the major perk, they're going to have so many things that can stun you or interrupt your charge that it's really hard to find consistent value with it. So we're also going to be putting this one in mid. Roadhog's first minor perk, Scrap Hook, makes it so that Chain Hook hits reload 2 ammo. This is kind of cool when you first read it, because it's definitely very annoying when you hook an enemy and end up hearing that empty click as you don't shoot them and don't one-shot them, and all you did was pull them up to give you a hug. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really help you too much if you're playing well and just thinking about your ammo and just not throwing a hook when you don't have ammo. So for that reason, I'm frankly gonna put this one in bad. It's like a quality of life thing, but like if you just play right, it's not very helpful. Hog's other minor perk, Hog Toss, makes it so the Pigpen's throw range is increased by 50% and the damage is increased by 25%. Before, this was just throw range, which is pretty irrelevant, because the vast majority of the time when you're using this ability, you're just throwing it at your feet and using it to combo with your hook anyway, right? So the damage increase made this ability much better, but at the end of the day, it's still not super great. We're gonna put it in mid, but the damage increase definitely made it a little bit better. And now when you hook a tank, just that little bit of extra damage and disruption is really going to help you out a bit more. Invigorate as Hog's first major perk, which makes it so that Roadhog's movement speed is increased by 30 while he's breathing, or using his breather. This one's pretty good. I'm gonna put it in A tier, because not only is it good to run away, it's also good to just like help you take flanks and also just come out of spawn faster, right? It's basically just a 30% move speed. So if you want to go for a flank hook on an off angle, you can just heal to run around the corner faster, or when you're just walking out of spawn, just use it to walk back to the fight that much faster. It's pretty good. Hydrogen Exposure is Roadhog's other major perk, which makes it so Take a Breather also heals nearby allies for 50% of its healing. Definitely a broken name. Great name, but from a viability perspective, it's definitely decent. I think we're gonna put it. I think I'm gonna put it in mid, but it's definitely in the higher tier of mid. Roadhog, it's nice that he can provide some utility and some help for his team, but at the end of the day, Roadhog is a character that he's a DPS masquerading as a tank, right? So a lot of time you want to be flanking and trying to throw hooks from the off angles to try to one shot the squishies. So a lot of time you don't really want to be standing around your teammates just like trying to heal them anyway. Sigma's first minor perk, Kinetic Cycle, makes it so that absorbing projectiles with Kinetic Grasp also reduces Accretion's cooldown. This one's pretty good. A lot of the time, you're going to want to go in really aggressively with your rock and then, use your shift to kind of build some extra HP and sustain yourself into the fight, which just lets you throw your Accretion again faster. So we'll put this one in A tier because it actually is pretty useful, and rock is such a powerful cooldown for that reason. Massive Impact makes it so that Accretion's knockdown duration increases up to 3 seconds based on travel distance. This one is crazy. I'm putting this one in broken, really with no consideration whatsoever. Yeah, you don't have the OP-ness of Halt Hook anymore, so you're not going to be, consistently throwing these rocks across the map. But when you catch a rock from the other side of the map and it stuns you for a long time, you really feel it. And a lot of the time, it's super easy for Sigma to follow it up with even just 2 bursts of his, auto attack. Really makes it super consistent to clean up on those long kills or the long stuns that you find. Sigma's first major perk, Hyper Strike, makes it so that every 5 direct hits with his Hyperspheres, your next successful quick melee levitates and knocks enemies away. This one I underrated a bit. It's definitely strong, and it's really quite annoying when you're playing like a dive comp and you end up, the Sigma pokes for a little bit, you finally dive onto the Sigma and you punch him and you just like float out of your bubble as Winston, or you just like slowly start to float away. It really makes it easy for his teammates to shoot you or hit a stun on you, and this one can really be felt. I kind of underrated this one pretty heavy, so we'll put it in A tier as well. Levitation makes it so that you can activate and hold double jump to briefly levitate upwards. I definitely overrated this perk just because movement is always king and Sigma doesn't really have any movement, but really at the end of the day, you move quite slow and it really isn't very much height at all. So I'm going to put this one in mid. I think it's probably towards the better end of mid, but again, it's not super relevant for a major perk. Short Circuit is Winston's first minor perk, which makes it so that you deal 50% more damage to deployable objects such as turrets and barriers. This one's definitely not bad. It makes it, you can help your team break torp turrets that they're never going to shoot, and for some reason you are responsible for shooting. So, you can poke those down a little bit faster with your right click. It lets you break like Yari pylons or BAP drones a little bit faster while still cleaving the rest of their team. So it's definitely not bad, but a lot of the time this isn't really your responsibility anyway. So it kind of just helps you alleviate when your team is slacking, right? So for that reason, I'll probably just put it in mid, but again, it's probably towards the higher tier of mid. Heavy Landing makes it so that during primal raids, jump packs damage and area increase by up to 75% while airborne. This perk's pretty crazy. Granted, you have to jump pretty high into the air to like have it charge all the way, but when it does charge all the way, if you land on someone and at the same time you land on them, you also punch them, it really makes the burst damage that's available to Winston during his primal a lot more significant. And then you also consider the fact that you could do it multiple times, and also like because the area increases there too, it makes it so that you don't even need to be as precise as you do before. This is a really strong perk and makes Winston's primal a lot more oppressive. Winston's first major perk, Chain Lightning, makes it so that fully charged secondary hits bounce up to 2 additional targets. This perk is crazy. I'm putting this one in broken immediately with no thought whatsoever. It basically just turns your right clicks into an alt charging machine, and especially if you're like, imagine you're trying to fight like a tracer or a squishy character that has like a lot of movement and they're kind of hard to hit. You can just charge a right click and hit the tank, and it's gonna dash over to the tracer or to the Genji or whatever, and it's just so much burst damage, and you can really shoot these off quite often. So we're definitely gonna put this one in broken. Barrier Projector makes it so that it heals allies within it for 30 HP per second. This is really, really strong as well. I'm gonna put this one in A tier, although it's probably, it's on the higher end of A tier. This just makes your bubble so much more flexible, and if you dive onto someone and one of your teammates goes into the bubble to help follow up, you're healing your team for 60 HP per second, and then it also makes bubble a lot more flexible, right? Like you don't necessarily want to be bubbling your teammates and like bubbling passively very often, but for the few instances where that is happening, it just gives them that much more healing, can make your supports that much harder to dive. It just makes bubble so much more flexible, and it's really strong. Wrecking Ball's first minor perk, Steamroller, makes it so that roll impacts deal 100% more damage to tanks. This is a perk that I initially underrated quite heavily. For some reason, when I thought about it, I really just considered like you're just going to be like rolling through the tank once and then going away. But when I sat down and ended up playing with it more often, I found there were a lot of instances where, you can just hold your grapple for longer and hit the tank, some 3-4 times with the same roll, and 100% extra damage when you're doing that like over and over and over again, sometimes in really short succession. It's really gets felt. So yeah, this isn't what you necessarily want to be doing as Wrecking Ball a ton, but it can happen, and there are instances where it's strong. So I'm going to put Steamroller in A tier. Next up, we have Pack Rat, which makes it so the health packs heal an additional 100 health. This is another perk that I will say I overrated. I still think this perk is really, really strong, but you also have to consider that anytime you take a health pack, that's support alt charge that you're denying your team. And, there are definitely some niche comps and some specific comps where your team doesn't have very much healing and they don't want to take their time to slow down and heal a tank or a Wrecking Ball specifically, which makes this perk a lot better. And then there are also like maps where there are more mini health packs, which make mini health packs like really, really, you really feel them when you pick them up. So I'm gonna put Pack Rat still in A tier. This one's really strong and really increases ball survivability. Hang time makes it so the pile drive winds up longer and you get some extra air control and you deal up to 50% more damage. This perk is crazy. This is one of my favorites in the entire game and makes Ball's pile drive so much more oppressive, and it's what Ball needs, right? You actually can feel like a real solo kill. It just gives you solo kill potential, right? Like, yeah, the extra airtime makes you a little bit it makes it easier for you to get like stunned out of it, but a lot of the time if you just slam from high in the air, the extra air control easily makes up for that. So frankly, I'm gonna put this one in broken as well, because when I get this perk as Wrecking Ball, I feel like it's a real power spike, and by the time I get it basically, I feel like I finally have come online, right? So this perk's really, really strong. Ball's last major perk makes it so that reactivating Adaptive Shield reduces its cooldown by 1.5 seconds per ally affected, and the shield transfer cost is reduced by 50%. This one, I think, is still... They buffed it and made it a bit better, but at the end of the day, this is just not what Wrecking Ball wants to be doing, and if you're playing this tight to your team and just kind of trying to transfer them shields nonstop, you would just have a better time playing a lot of pretty much any other tank, right? So I'm gonna put this one in mid. I just don't really like this ability very much because it just feels so against what Ball wants to be doing, right? And lastly, we have Zarya. Jump ups makes it so that secondary fire's knockback is increased by 75%. I'm straight up, I'm just gonna put this one in broken. This is a minor perk, which means you get it really, really fast, and 75% is a big number, right? This really gives a character that didn't have a lot of mobility a lot more options with how she can traverse the map, and how much harder, how harder it makes it to kill her, and how much she can really just find new angles and find new flank routes, and just pressure the hit scan characters that can sit on the high ground and just shoot for free. It makes it so much easier for her to pressure them, and there's not much scarier than a high charge Zarya jumping into your face completely randomly from somewhere that you're not used to. So this perk is really, really wild. Graviton Crush makes it so that the Graviton Surge deals up to 30% of enemy max health as damage over time. This one's pretty good. I'm gonna put it in A tier. It's probably towards the lower tier side of A tier, but I'm gonna put it there anyway, just because, yeah, most of the time when you grab someone, you're going to be doing like an ult combo, and you should ideally have high charge, which means, a lot of the time you're gonna be able to kill the squishies yourself, but sometimes you just don't have a combo, or you want to grab when you're low charge, and this really helps, especially when you're grabbing like the healthier characters, or when they have a beat, for example, which really, that changes their max health a lot, so really can add up. Energy Lance makes it so that your particle cannon's beam pierces enemies while you're over 50 energy. I'm gonna go ahead and say this is one of the most overrated perks in the entire game. It's one of those perks that's definitely going to do better in lower ranks, where people tend to be more stacked up. But once you start to get to the higher end of the ladder, people are going to be split up a lot more often. So the value you're going to find from this is a lot less. It's really strong when they're in Grav and you're just like cleaving an entire group of people, I will say. But I think this perk's super duper overrated. I'm gonna put it in mid. I sure it's towards like the higher end of mid, but I think this one's super duper overrated. And lastly, for the tank, we have Spotter, which makes it so the projected barrier activates ally health regeneration and increases their movement speed by 15%. This perk is insane. Zarya, she wants to be giving her teammates allied bubbles instead of bubbling herself a lot, and this just makes bubble, which is something you already don't want to break. You just, the way you got to think of it is like it starts their healing, and it doesn't go away because the other team's not going to want to break the bubble, so they're just going to get healed a bunch. They're going to have a shield that makes them take less damage and not get stunned, and they're going to be moving faster. And this is on a really short cooldown, because basically you can be spamming them, because the cooldown's shorter when you give a bubble to your teammate, right? So this makes her allied bubbles that much more oppressive, and it really changes how oppressive they are. Next up we have DPS, and first up we have Ashe. Rapid Fire makes it so that unscoped shots gain 30% increased attack speed but deal 15% less damage. I'm just gonna straight up put this one in bad. A lot of the time you don't want to be spamming unscoped shots anyway, because it just means you have to reload sooner, and Ashe has a long reload, and just to be able to, the way I think of this perk is you're just basically picking it to run out of ammo and have to spend more time reloading. This one's just straight up bad. Sidewinder makes it so that Coach Gun pushes Ashe and enemies 20% further. We're going to straight up put this one in A tier. I think it's really strong. It just puts more space between you and the dive targets and can also help you reach some harder to reach areas or high grounds, which really just helps for her mobility and, her biggest weakness of being dove. Viper's Sting makes it so that hitting 2 consecutive scope shots on a target deals 25 extra damage and reloads 2 ammo. This one I'm putting in broken. If you're consistently hitting your shots, not only are you dealing a pretty substantial amount of extra damage, you also don't have to reload, right? And like I just said, one of Ashe's biggest weaknesses is the fact that her reload takes so long. So if you just get to sit in the back and just keep shooting and shooting and shooting, and you're doing extra damage and you're reloading less often, it's really quite powerful. Airburst makes it so that Dynamite has a 40% increased detonation radius while airborne and refunds 3 ammo when thrown. I'm going to put this one in A tier, I think. The 40% increased detonation radius makes it a lot easier to hit more enemies with it, especially when you're trying to throw it around corners and hit people around corners. The 3 ammo that gets refunded isn't super relevant because I find a lot of the time as Ashe, I'm going to be opening the fight with it. So, you're not really getting that much value out of that first use of it. Maybe later in the fight it's useful, but a lot of the time I find I'm only getting value out of the increased detonation radius, which isn't bad, but it's just not that amazing, right? Bastion's first minor perk, Smart Bomb, makes it so that the self knockback is increased by 25% and no longer damages you. This one's really good. I find a lot of what sets a good Bastion player apart from a great one is how often they are using their Smart Bomb the grenade just to move around the map and to quicker swing around corners, and taking away not only taking away the damage that it gives you, but also being able to go extra high or extra fast around these corners makes your engages a lot more threatening and makes you a lot more flexible with the way you play him. Armored Artillery makes it so when you ult, you get 300 temporary overhealth. I definitely underrated this perk, but I still think it's not super great. I'm gonna put it towards like the high end of mid. But a lot of the time when you use this, like Bastion's ult's already pretty underwhelming, so a lot of the time this just turns your ult into a, oh no, I'm in danger, I want a bunch of extra health. So a lot of the time when I see people getting value out of this one, it'll be like they use their form and then they get walked on or they're about to die, so they just ult, drop a bunch of shots on their feet and then come out of it pretty much instantly, right? So it's kind of just like a panic, I need 300 extra HP, which is strong, but it's still not amazing. Self-repair makes you have a new resource meter that basically just heals you like you used to. This is really strong. This was nerfed recently because before it just didn't have any meter at all, but the amount of self-healing you get is still a lot. Before I would have put it in broken, but now that it's actually on a resource meter, we're just going to put it in A. Lindholm Explosives turns your configuration into a tank, and you just fire like much slower, but your shots are, missiles basically instead of bullets. This changes how Bastion uses his form pretty drastically and lets you, instead of just kind of pumping into the tank and trying to blow them up, it lets you threaten squishies a lot more. It's actually capable of two-shotting 250 HP characters, which is pretty substantial. It ends up being pretty niche, but when you're actually hitting with it, it really does hit. This is actually one of my favorite perks in the whole game to use, not because I think it's amazing, but because I just think it's really fun. I'm still going to put it in A tier though. Cassidy's first minor perk, Quick Draw, makes it so that Fan the Hammer shots are individually controlled and can crit for 50% more damage. This one, I just don't really see the vision behind it. Even after the buff, I find a lot of the time you don't want to be wasting all your ammo, and yeah, it's nice to be able to kind of like chunk tanks, but a lot of the time it just feels like you're kind of wasting your ammo when you would rather just be like using your individual mouse one shots. Fan the Hammer, it just hasn't felt the same in a long time, so I'm putting it in bad. Past Noon makes it so that Deadeye refunds 40% ultimate charge if it fully expires. This is another perk that I find really funny. This is a great name, firstly, but this one's funny because even Blizzard recognizes that so often this ult is just zoning. With that said, being able to zone, this often, if you aren't ending up shooting, it's actually pretty substantial. And a lot of the time, I've found myself, honestly, like I could do like a chunk of damage to the tank, or I could just have 40% ult charge. And sometimes I'm just picking the 40% ult charge because while this ultimate isn't crazy, the zoning capability of it is not insignificant. So I'm going to put it in mid. Gunslinging makes it so the crit hits with the primary fire reduce the cooldown of combat roll by 3 seconds. I'm going to put this one in A tier. I think it's probably towards the lower end of A tier, but I think it's pretty good when you're consistently hitting headshots, because you have to also consider that combat roll, not only does it reload your ammo, it also provides damage resistance, right? So if you're really in the thick of things and you're hitting those headshots and you're rolling around a lot, it really ups your damage output and your survivability because of the damage reduction. And lastly, Bang Bang, which makes it so the Cassidy throws a second flashbang that travels further, but both flashbangs deal 30% reduced damage. This one's pretty solid. I'm gonna put it in mid. I think it's towards the higher end of mid. The damage isn't super relevant on flashbang anyway, so it's really the most useful part of it is the extra distance, but it doesn't even feel like it's that much extra distance, so I think it's still pretty underwhelming. Friendly imaging makes it so that Echo can duplicate allies. I'm going to put this one in A tier. It just increases the amount of people that you can, you basically get access to their ult. And also a lot of the time I'll find as Echo, it's pretty hard to duplicate the exact enemy that you want to. So being able to dupe, people that aren't trying to hide from you makes it just a lot more consistent to really hit the right target and find value at the right time. Enhanced duplication makes it so that during duplicate, your clone's first ultimate extends duplication's ult duration by 3 seconds. This one's really nice, and a lot of the times I found as Echo, I'll like get ult finally and I'll use it, and then my ult will basically just end. And this kind of alleviates that pain point and really just makes your ult that much stronger. So I'll put this one in A tier as well. Full salvo makes it so that you fire 50% more projectiles when you use sticky bombs, but they all deal 15% less damage. I'm gonna put this one in bad. The way the math works out on this one, it means you have to hit like you can only miss like one of the extra bombs to make the damage worthwhile. So this one's really honestly quite weak. I'd say it just makes your sticky bombs a lot more inconsistent at putting out the same amount of damage output as you would have without it. High beams makes it so that focusing beam eliminations reset flight's cooldown. This one's all right. I'm gonna put it in mid. It's towards the lower end of mid, but yeah, it's nice when this actually happens, but a lot of the time you can't really rely on this. So trying to commit in a way that basically relies on you actually getting the limb with the focusing beam makes it so that sometimes if that ends up not happening for one reason or another, you're kind of just in a bad situation that you put yourself in. Genji's first minor perk, Acrobatics, makes it so the Swift Strike and Wall Climb resets double jump. They buffed this one recently to include both Swift Strike and Wall Climb, which made it a little bit better, but it's still pretty mid. Dragon's Thirst makes it so the Dragon Blade swings gain 30% lifesteal. This one's really good and makes Dragon Blade a lot more threatening. The amount of times I find myself like after I've gone on the squishies with my blade and now like the Winston's on me and he's zapping me, before I would just have to basically run away, but now you can kind of just tank up and just stand in his face and just trade hits with him. So this also makes like things like Dragon Blade and like damage boosts when you're blading that much stronger. So I think Dragon's Thirst is pretty strong. Blade Twisting makes it so the Strife Strike deals 25 additional damage over time when used shortly after an elimination. Yeah, this is one of those perks that's kind of like a win more perk, because by the time you get a limb, that's an advantage, and now you're in a 4v5 or whatever. So, but the fact that you can dash through multiple people and apply this to multiple targets really makes this super strong and makes Genji's snowballing potential so much stronger. So I'm definitely going to put this one. This one's like a high A tier. Meditation makes Genji regenerate 35 health per second while Deflect is active. It's pretty strong, and Deflect lasts a pretty long time, so it's a good amount of self-heal that really is on a defensive ability anyway. So I'm going to put it in mid, but again, I think it's towards the higher end of mid. Hanzo's first minor perk, Sonic Disruption, makes it so that Sonic arrows hack nearby health packs for 12 seconds. This one's pretty middling. It's nice to be able to occasionally like deny a hacked health pack from the enemy, or give your tank some extra healing, but a lot of the time the packs that you actually want to be taking control of are pretty far away from the fight, so it's not super helpful. Scatter arrows make it so that storm arrows split into 3 new projectiles on their first ricochet and bounce 2 extra times. This one, it sounds a lot better than it actually is. I'm gonna put it in mid. Again, it feels weird putting it in the same tier as Sonic Disruption, so I'd say it's in the higher tier of mid. But a lot of the time, the bounciness of it's just super random, and it's also, it's only when it's on Ricochet, right? So a lot of the time, I've struggled to actually find value out of it. When most of the time, you're gonna just be trying to actually hit the people with the Sonic Storm arrows directly, right? Dragon Fury makes it so that after hitting an enemy with primary fire, you gain 25% attack speed for 1 second. This is pretty not, it sounds good on paper, but when you recognize that a lot of the time after you hit an enemy, like ideally it's going to be a headshot. So a lot of the time when you hit an enemy, you're kind of just killing them, right? So getting just a little bit of extra attack speed, it's ends up being ultimately kind of irrelevant, just because if you're hitting arrows that consistently to be getting that much value out of it, they're going to be like basically just dying anyway, right? So it's not super duper useful. So I'm going to put it in mid. Hanzo's last major perk makes it so that wall climb accelerates your lunge cooldown by 250%. This one's definitely Hanzo's best perk. I'm going to put it in A tier. I think it's towards the lower end of A tier, but this kind of changes how much movement he has and makes him a lot harder to dive if you just play tight on a wall. You can, lunge to a wall, climb up, and then basically you get to just lunge again instantly, because lunge's cooldown's not very long anyway, right? Aluminum Frame makes Steel Trap's throw range increased by 50%. One's actually pretty solid. I think it's pretty underrated because a lot of people compare it to his other minor perk, but I think this one on its own has some merit and can let you put a decent amount more pressure on the backline if you kind of just lob a trap over the tank and onto the supports. So I'm going to put this one in mid, but it's towards the higher end of mid. Nitro Boost makes it so that Riptire can use left shift to gain a quick boost of speed, which reduces Riptire's damage by 50%. This one is pretty crazy. I'm gonna put this one in A tier. It really lets you do a lot more creative things with your tire, and it makes it a lot easier to go onto the squishies, which are the people you really want to be aiming for with the tire anyway. And then you also, at the end of the day, you don't have to use it every single time you pop tire. So if you want to go for the tank, you can just not use the left shift to still do like the max amount of damage, right? Frag Cannon makes the frag launcher's projectile speed increased by 40%, but its max ammo is reduced by 1. This one's weird because at the end of the day, it kind of just makes your aim more inconsistent and makes you adjust to a new projectile speed, only to at the end of the game go back to the old one. So it feels kind of awkward to get used to. I think it's definitely useful, and I do end up taking it most of the time, but it really is felt, and I'm not really a huge fan of the way this one's implemented. So I'm gonna put it in mid. Again, I'd say it's towards the higher end of mid, but I'm not really a huge fan of how this one feels. TikToks makes it so that your mine arms 0.5 seconds after landing, increasing its damage by 50%, explosion radius by 50%, and health by 200%. It's nice, and it makes traps a little bit more oppressive, but most of the time when you're using a mine, you're just deading it in the air anyway, so it's not super strong. Chilling Reach makes May's primary range increased by 30%. This one's pretty strong and lets you threaten your freeze from a lot further of a distance, and a lot of the time when you're using May's Mouse 1, you're going to be kind of just like dashing it around, so you're going to be applying it to a lot of people. So being able to do that from further away really just makes May that much harder to gap close on when you're getting hit by the slow. So I think it's pretty strong. Permafrost was recently buffed to make it so that May Wall's duration is increased by 2 seconds, and now there's no increase on the cooldown. I'm still putting this one. I don't know if I want to put it in bad. I'm gonna put it in bad. I'm gonna put it towards the higher end of bad, but I'm still gonna put it in bad because most of the time when you use Maywall, it's gonna break anyway before the full duration. So yeah, like some pillars are gonna get to stay up, but like the main pillars that you're trying to really hide people off behind, they're gonna break before the duration increases there anyway. So I think this one's pretty overrated. Biting Cold is pretty crazy. Biting Cold makes it so the secondary fire hits slow enemy by 15% for 1.5 seconds, stacking up to 30%. This just makes May's 1v1 potential so much harder, and it also her spam just that much more annoying when you're just getting hit from icicles from across the map that are also stacking slow on you. I'm gonna put this one in broken. I think this perk's actually crazy. Cryostorm makes an aura around May's ice block that slows enemies and deals 70 damage per second. I think this one's not super great. I think it's a lot of fun to use, but I don't think it's actually that powerful. Just because the slow is nice, but 70 damage per second isn't very much, and also that's just not really how you want to be using Ice Block, right? You don't want to use Ice Block aggressively, so I'm gonna put this one in mid. Drift Thrusters makes it so that Pharah can move while Barrage is active. This one, easy A tier. I can't believe Pharah has been stationary and during her ult for as long as she has anyway, so just, it's pretty slow, but anything that makes you not a complete setting duck and a little bit easier or a little bit more mobile to try to like dodge headshots and stuff makes the ult that much stronger, so yeah, definitely A tier. Helix shields convert 125 HP to shields. I'm going to put this one in mid. I think it's towards the higher end of mid, but when you have decent healers, this isn't going to be super helpful, especially considering the passive that's now, or just the global health healing passive that's in the game now anyway. Like, it's definitely noticeable, and it's definitely a lot faster than the passive, but it's just not that helpful when you have competent healers, which most of the time you will. Concussive Implosion makes it so that Concussive Blast's knockback is inverted to a pull-in. Broken. This is my pick for a top 3 perk in the entire game. This perk is absolutely crazy. It basically just turns Conk into Halt, which we all know how overpowered that ability was, and it's on the same cooldown. You can spam it from a distance and follow it up with a rocket to guarantee a direct hit, or you can combo with your ult and just wipe teams non-stop consistently. This perk is absolutely busted. Fuel stores make it so that Jet Dash grants 50% fuel, maximum overfuel is increased by 100%. I'm going to put this one in mid. I don't think Pharah already has a decent amount of uptime in the air, and a lot of the time, you don't want to be just like perma in the skybox anyway, right? Like, your windows of opportunity are pretty short on Pharah, so like it's nice to spam, but I think this one's not that great, so for that reason it's in mid. Death's Shadow makes it so the Shadow Step reloads Hellfire shotguns and has 25% increased range. The range increase on this is definitely the selling point. I'm going to put it in A tier, even though it's towards the lower end of A tier. Soul Reaving makes it so that you can collect soul globes from dead enemies to restore 50 HP. This is another just win war perk, and 50 HP is not that much in the grand scheme of things when you also have to consider you have healers and just the lifesteal that Reaper has passively. So I'm gonna put it in mid. Dire Triggers makes it so you can have a right click that fires a volley with long range accuracy from both Hellfire shotguns. You can kind of weave it in with your auto mouse 1 attacks, but it's not very strong, and it's like some extra burst damage, and it does increase your DPS output, but it does feel kind of underwhelming for a major perk, so I'm gonna also put that one in mid. And lastly, Ravenous Wraith makes it so that when you leave Wraith form, you get an additional 40% lifesteal for 3 seconds. This one is pretty good. I'm putting it in A tier. I think it's towards the lower end of A tier, but I think this one's pretty good. A lot of the time when you come out of Wraith form, you're going to be getting chased, so being able to quicker turn on them and, either ultimates, which makes you have a ton of lifesteal, or just start shooting them with your guns, makes when Reaper is at his most vulnerable, it makes him a little bit more survivable, which is really nice. Extended Mag increases Sojourn's ammo capacity by 15. This one's just going in A tier. It's just a global increase to your ammo, which just lets her shoot for a lot more. It impacts her all the time, when she's ulting, when she's not, when she's using mouse 1, when she's using mouse 2. It just really ups her DPS over the course of the game, which is pretty crazy for a minor perk. Overcharged makes the railgun's maximum energy increase by 50% while overclock is active, meaning you can charge to 150. It's pretty strong, but it is only affecting your ultimate, and it does make you, a little bit more threatening with one-shots, but that does also lower the amount of shots that you're going to be able to take, because you need to wait that extra time for it to charge to 150 instead of just charging to 100. So I'm going to put it in mid, but I want to stress this is towards the higher end of mid. Dual Thrusters turns Power Slide into lateral movement and gives you an additional charge of it. This one is weird to think about because it definitely changes depending on the map, but having 2 charges or charges of slide is just really strong. Like, yeah, you definitely are going to feel the not being able to take as many high grounds, but it lets you be a lot more you just mobile laterally, right? So I'm gonna put it in mid, but it's definitely towards the higher end of mid. Adhesive Siphon makes it so that Disruptor Shot can stick to enemies and generate Railgun energy when dealing damage. Both parts of this are really strong. You know, sticking it to someone, it isn't going to do the max amount of damage if it's stuck to them, so it's not going to like one-shot like squishies, but it is going to really, really hurt them. But this big part of this one to me is the Railgun energy that it charges. You know, when you put a E into a big group of enemies and then shoot, you're going to find you're getting your charge from your rail really, really fast. So I'm going to put this one in A tier. I think it's really strong for this second part mostly. Recycled pulse munitions makes it so that Helix rockets reload 15 ammo if they damage an enemy. This just increases his DPS and lets him, you know, the cooldown on rockets is pretty short. So a lot of the time, you know, this will just let you stand in one position and just shoot for longer. But I find a lot of the time I'm opening my fights with the Helix rockets, so I'm not getting value out of them. So I usually only get value out of it later in the fight, which means I'm going to put it in mid. Field Emergency makes Biotic Field's healing increased by 100% on crit health allies. I think this one's really strong. I think this one's super underrated. I'm gonna put it in A tier. I think a lot of soldier players only use their heal station for themselves and not for their allies, and I think that's a reason that it might be underrated. But when you play soldier properly and you look for opportunities to put heal stations on either your tank or your supports or even your other DPS, I find you'll find a lot more situations where it's viable. And it's also just really nice when you're just being dove, right? Like an extra 100% healing whenever you're getting knocked to crit really can help sustain you, especially when you consider, you know, other healing sources that might be coming towards you. Agility training makes it so that your sprint speed is increased by 20% and the reload can be performed while sprint is active. I think this one's really good. I think Soldier being able to sprint around and flank more, I think that's already Soldier's strength. So being able to do it that much faster is really nice. And the reload speed or the being able to reload while sprinting is really just a bonus that honestly I feel like he should always have anyway. But the speed is really nice. I'm putting that one in A tier because I think that's just what Soldier's all about. Stim Pack makes it so that Biotic Field can be used as a Stim Pack, which increases his attack speed and reload speed by 30%, but makes him anti-healed for 4 seconds. They recently buffed this to cleanse you, or so that you can be cleansed, but with that said, I still don't think this one's very good. I think, you know, the Biotic Field cooldown is so long, and a lot of the time when you pull up on an off angle like this and you want to start, you know, shooting your stim back at you, it's going to pull a lot of aggro, and they're going to be pretty quick to mark you out of that position, and then not having that heal available or even be able to get healed by your supports really makes you at a really big disadvantage. So I think this one's pretty overrated. I'm going to put it in mid. Sombra's viral efficacy makes it so that virus's cooldown is reduced by 3 seconds when an enemy affected by virus is eliminated. This is another one of those win more perks that only comes into effect when you're already winning the fight. So I'm gonna put this one in mid tier. I'd say it's the higher end of mid tier, but I still think it's pretty mid just because, again, it's just one of those win more perks, right? Control-Alt-Escape makes it so that when you teleport with Translocator while at critical health, the initial passive health basically goes on instantly. I think that's pretty strong, but I find that a lot of the time, you know, you're going to just be out of range of the crit health threshold, so I don't find that I get a ton of value out of it that much. And a lot of the time when I'm throwing my Translocator, I'm throwing it towards a health pack anyway. So I'm going to put it in mid. I think it's towards the higher end of mid, but I don't find myself getting value out of this super duper often. White Hat makes it so that you can hack your teammates and that restores 100 health to them over 2 seconds. I think this one, it's definitely annoying when you accidentally hack one of your teammates, but just looking at the ability itself, like it really is quite helpful to be able to hack one of your flankers or one of your divers who's diving with you and just give them that 100 healing. Like, yeah, you want to be hacking the enemies most of the time anyway, and I do recognize how annoying it is, but this perk's definitely not bad. I'm going to put it in mid. I think it's towards the higher end of mid, and it can be annoying, but when it's good, it's really good. And lastly, we have Stack Overflow, which makes Hack's silence duration. It increases it by 100%, but its range is decreased by 15%. Honestly, I think this perk was recently buffed, and I think this perk was, I think it was definitely like the range reduction was felt, but I don't think it was nearly as bad as people acted like it was, and I thought that perk was pretty good before. And now that it's less of a range decrease, I think this perk has actually become really good. I'm not going to put it in broken, but I am going to put it in A tier, and I think it's on the higher end of A tier. You do have to adjust to the range, but once you have the silence duration being increased by 100%, I mean 100%, it's double, right? That's a lot, so it's pretty strong. Sentry capacity gives Symmetra an additional turret, basically. This one I find really strong. I'm gonna put it in A tier. I think it's towards the higher end of A. I considered broken, but I'm gonna end up putting it in A. One extra turret, that's just one extra turret that can mark a flank or can slow the enemy, or can even go into your TP bombs. It really just makes Sim that much stronger. And for a minor perk, that's really, quite frankly, it's just really strong. Advanced teleportation makes it so the teleporter's range is increased by 50%. This one's definitely strong too, and it lets you be more creative with your tele and really catch some people off guard, especially if you go for plays with it in OT. And it's also definitely map dependent, but when it's good, it's really good. So I'm gonna put it in A tier as well. I'd say it's towards the bottom end of A tier, but I think this one's really quite powerful for a minor perk as well. Next up, we have Perfect Alignment, which makes it so the primary fire's range increases by 15% with each additional charge. I think this is another perk that's really, honestly, kind of grossly overrated. I don't think it's bad by any means, but I think just how powerful it is really quite overstated, because a lot of the time, by the time you've got high charge anyway, you're going to be mowing people down, and that little bit of extra range is going to be kind of irrelevant, because you're going to be teleporting into them, or you're going to have already been walking forward really aggressively because of how amped up and how much damage you're doing. So I'm going to put it in mid. I'd say it's the higher end of mid, but I do think this perk's pretty overrated. And then lastly, for Symmetra, we have Shield Battery, which makes it so the Symmetra regenerates 20 shields per second while within 10 meters of her teleporter. I think this one's really strong. I'm going to put it in A tier. I'd say it's towards the higher end of A tier. The way I think of it is, like, Symmetra's teleporter already basically has infinite uptime, and you're going to be fighting around it the vast majority of the time anyway. So this is just healing you for 20 shields per second most of the time, right? So it just really ups her survivability and lets her brawl a lot harder. Craftsman makes it so that Forged Hammer can restore armor health to allies, turret gains 25 increased HP, and the turret's repair heal is increased by 25%. This first part, it's funny, but it's not going to come up very often, or it shouldn't at least. But the turret gaining 25 extra HP and being able to get healed for more is really where this perk shines. 25% extra HP is not insignificant, also when you consider how much extra HP you can be giving when you repair it. I'm going to put it in A tier. I'd say it's towards the lower end of A, but the 25 extra HP that you're giving your turret is pretty important. Fully loaded makes it so that when you use your overload ability, it basically just refills your entire clip. That's pretty strong. I find a lot of the time you're going to be using your E pretty early in the fight, ideally, because you want the speed boost and the extra HP. So a lot of the time you won't get value out of it, but when you're kind of just spamming and then you get dove and then you can just get that big burst of extra HP and move speed and reload your ammo at the same time, it really is felt. It can be felt. So I'm going to put this one in A tier as well. Anchor Bolts makes it so that you can throw your turret 50% further, and it can now attach to walls and ceilings. This one I definitely underrated, but I underrated it because I kind of just overestimated the average player's ability to shoot turrets, period. And now that they're on walls and in the skyboxes, heaven save us, right? Like, people never look up. So I'm gonna put this one in A tier. I think it's really high A tier, like really high A tier, borderline broken. But hopefully someday people will realize they can look up and break the turrets, and until that day, it's just gonna keep running amok. Overloaded turret makes it so that when you use your E, it upgrades your turret for 5 seconds, increasing its health and damage. I'm going to put this one in A tier as well. Again, I think this is another one that's borderline broken, but a lot of the time I find this is less about just like the extra damage of the turret and more about how annoying it is for the enemy when they're about to break it and then suddenly it has an extra health bar, basically, right? It's like it got BAP shift or something. It's super annoying to fight against, and the damage is pretty substantial, and it has a lot of HP when it's level 3. So I think this one's really strong, and it's not that long of a cooldown either. Tracer's Blink Packs makes it so that health packs restore 1 blink charge. It's okay. I'm gonna put it in mid. It's kind of funny picking up a health pack when you haven't taken any damage, and can be pretty annoying to enemies. But only 1 health pack, or only 1 blink charge for a health pack, it's not very substantial. So we're putting it in mid. Blast from the Past makes it so that Pulse Bomb's radius is increased by 50%. I'm putting this one in A tier. It's probably towards the end or the lower end of A tier, but it just makes it so that the bombs, even if you miss on the ground, it makes it so that you can potentially do more damage, but also just to make it easier for the enemy team to get stuck and then just walk into their teammates and blow them up too. The 50% is a pretty big number. It can definitely be felt. Flashback makes it so that whenever you recall, it restores all your blink charges. I'm putting this one in broken. So much of Tracer over the years has been Tracer like going in and making sure that when she rewinds, that's her downtime, right? Because she has to chill and be careful because she, usually won't have many blinks and she doesn't have that get out jail free card. But now when she rewinds, she can instantly get back and get active again because by the time you recall, you've probably already put out a lot of pressure and the other teams use a bunch of cooldowns. So rewinding basically just means you can get right back into the thick of things. It's really, really strong. Tracer's other major perk makes it so that recalling grants 50 overhealth that decays over time, and it's kind of pretty much the similar advantage to flashback as it lets you get active again after reloading or after recalling, but frankly flashback, like getting your blink charges back, is just so much stronger. So 50 overhealth, like it lets you get a little bit more involved, but you are still Tracer and not having your recall is still scary, so I'm only gonna put that one in A tier. Venture's first minor perk, Seismic Sense, makes it so that when you're underground, Venture can sense enemies within 25% meters, meaning you just get wall hacks on them. This is pretty strong, and you can also ping people, so give your teammates those wall hacks as well. I'm gonna put this one in A tier. I'd say it's towards the lower end of A tier, but wall hacks, it's always good, right? Excavation Exhilaration makes it so that when you're ulting, your cooldowns refresh 300% faster. I'm going to put this one in broken. I think it's on the lower end of broken. It may be high A tier, but this really changes how Venture can use their ult and makes it a lot more polarizing and powerful because of how much you can just kind of spam and catch people off guard. And, even sometimes I find myself not wanting to use the last burst of, my ultimate just because I want to continue to spam abilities, right? It lets you be a lot more annoying, which I think, that's kind of Venture's whole thing, right? Smart's Excavator makes it so that the mouse 1 has an extra 25% range. I'm going to put this one in mid. I think this perk is grossly overrated, and I think there are situations where it's nice, but if you're playing Venture properly, you don't want to be playing at range anyway. Venture's all about getting in people's faces and hitting those burst damage combos and cycling your abilities. So this kind of it lets you poke a little bit better, but again, that's just not what Venture wants to be doing. And then lastly, Covered in Dirt makes it so that dealing damage with Clobber, which is Venture's melee, grants up to 30 Explorer's Resolve shields. I'm going to put this one in mid. I think it's towards the higher end of mid, and I think this perk is quite underrated. I think it's weak, but I don't think it's useless, right? Like there are amount of times where I'm just waiting for one of my abilities to come up and I can just stand on a corner and when someone pushes me, I can just melee them and get 30 extra HP. The amount of times that it saves me to get back to my next ability so that I can go under or hit the next burst damage with my drill, it comes up a lot. So I think this perk's a lot better than people give it credit for. Scoped Efficiency makes it so that scoped shots cost 3 ammo instead of 5. I'm gonna put this one in mid. I'd say it's higher end of mid, but I think it's not bad, and it just reduces the amount of time she has to reload, which lets her get a little bit more active, but it's not super substantial. So Focused Aim make it so that scope shots charge 50% faster during infrasights. I'm going to put this one in his mid as well, because when you have infrasights active, people are going to be trying not to peek you anyway. So having that little bit of extra charge time, it's not super duper relevant, but it does let you get a lot more aggressive during them, which you want to be doing anyway. So, there's some use to it. I'd say it's towards the higher end of mid, but I don't think it's super amazing. Escape Plan makes it so that the scoped shot hits reduce your grappling hook's cooldown by up to 4 seconds. I think this one's actually pretty good and lets you be a lot more aggressive with the way you position and your retreats, because a lot of the time I'll find myself grappling into an aggressive location, hitting a shot, and then getting dove. And if you hit 2 shots, you're gonna basically have your grappling hook back. So it really makes you a lot harder to chase down, and especially after her recent HP buff, it's gonna let you be a lot more aggressive. So I think this perk got a lot better with the additional HP that she received. And lastly, we have Venom Mine gains 50% increased damage and a second charge, enabling 2 active mines at a time. I'm gonna put this one. It feels weird to say A tier. I want to stress that this is like the very end of A tier, and if I was gonna put it in mid, I'd put it at the very top of mid. I think the damage isn't super irrelevant, but I think people underestimate how good Venom Mine actually is, and like it is an ability that Blizzard seem to have forgot about. But giving wall hacks to Widow and letting you mark her flanks is really quite strong, right? So I think this one's a lot better than people give it credit for. So for that reason, we're gonna put it up there. First up, we have Ana's minor perk Groggy, which makes it so that enemies waking up from sleep dart are slowed for 2 seconds. I think there are matchups where this is one of the best perks in the entire game, but I'd say most of the time this is just going to be an A tier perk, just because it's only really felt when you're sleeping tanks, because most of the time if you sleep a DPS or a support, like they're going to probably just die, right? So there are only a few tanks that I think really get punished by this, and while it's good, I think it's not quite broken tier, right? Biotic Bounce makes it so that after exploding, Biotic Grenade bounces and explodes again for 50 damage and healing. I'm gonna put this one in broken. I'd say it's towards the lower end of broken, but a lot of the time you just kind of got to think of it like, yeah, the 50 damage and healing's not super significant, but it's also another proc of either the anti-nade or the bonus healing effect, right? And a lot of the time you can also just splash the same target with it twice, which just gives Ana like a lot more burst damage. So I think this Biotic Bounce is pretty wild. Headhunter allows Biotic Rifle to crit enemies. This one just lets Ana put out a lot more pressure, and especially when you're hitting your sleep darts, right? Like the amount of burst damage that you can then just do on your own without any teammate help, really, just makes it Ana that much more threatening. So we're gonna put this in in A tier as well. And then lastly, we have Shrike, which makes it so that using Nano Boost also casted on Ana. Also broken. This one just got nerfed, and it was a good nerf. Still broken though. Ana being able to nano herself, it just lets her get so much more aggressive. The damage reduction's insane. Also, just being able to peel for yourself, right? Like the amount of times Ana, like, I'm getting dove, I'm just gonna nano someone just so that I live, right? Like it's just so powerful and really makes an already incredible ult that much stronger. Baptiste's first minor perk, Field Medicine, makes it so that Immortality Field restores 80 health to nearby allies and 40 health to Baptiste when destroyed. This is pretty strong, honestly. It makes it so that when the drone breaks, and a lot of your teammates are usually going to be pretty low because they're at the drone threshold. It's just going to be that much little bit of extra bonus healing. And Baptiste specializes around that burst healing. So I'm going to put this one in A tier. I think it's on the lower end of A tier, but I think this one's pretty strong. Automated healing makes it so that after you ult, your shoulder turret periodically fires up to 12 shots at allies, each restoring 30 health. I think this one's solid. I'm gonna put it in mid. I'm gonna say it's on the higher end of mid, but I find a lot of the times when I ult anyway, I'm gonna be shooting right clicks through the amplification matrix and giving my teammates those doubled up healing turret or healing bursts anyway. So I find it's not gonna be super useful, but it's definitely not bad, and it adds up and lets you, it just lets you be more aggressive when you do end up matrixing instead of having to heal your teammates. Assault Burst makes it so that Regenerative Burst grants Baptiste 30% attack speed for 4 seconds, but no longer instantly heals. I'm straight up putting this one in bad. It lets him get more aggressive and shoot a little bit faster for not a long time, at the cost of the thing that it did best, right? Like what the best part of BAP's Burst is the fact that it's instant, right? And having this be a major perk, this one's just bad. Rocket Boots makes it so that while you're airborne with your exo boots, you can press space to dash horizontally. I'm gonna put this one in A. I again think it's on the lower end of A, but that extra burst of mobility and having more flexibility with his exo boots, which is already a really powerful ability that he has, I think just makes it that much stronger, and that it makes him that much harder to kill, and it just makes him much more evasive. Barrier Restoration makes it so the Shield Bash grants 30% movement speed for 1.5 seconds, and bashing an enemy restores 100 barrier health. The second part of this is not super relevant because most of the time you're using Shield Bash to get away from people, but the 30% movement speed when you're trying to get away from people is really helpful. I'm putting it in A tier. I think it's on the higher end of A. I considered broken, but it's mostly because of the movement speed buff. Morale Boost makes it so that Inspire lasts 3 seconds longer when activated by Whip Shot. I think this is another perk that's really kind of overrated. I'm going to put it in A tier. I'm gonna put it in mid just because I don't want to put it in the same tier as barrier restoration. Like, you have to consider that it's nice when you get that extra boost, but if you're hitting your whip shots off cooldown, you're not getting any value out of this, right? Like, picking this perk is like, it's like you're planning to miss basically. And don't get me wrong, it's nice to be able to apply an inspire to a flanker and have them run away and have that healing last on them for a long time, but a lot of the time, you're going to be throwing your whip off cooldown anyway, so a lot of the time, a lot of the value you'll get from this is kind of wasted, right? Quick Fix makes it so the repair packs instantly heal an additional 35 HP to crit health allies. I'm gonna put this one in broken. I think it's towards the lower end of broken, closer to maybe closer to high A tier, but I think this one's really strong. And it's what Brig excels at anyway, right? Is the burst healing of hurt allies from ranges, right? So an extra 35% or 35 extra HP when someone's crit really can turn the tides of the battle just that much more. And then Whiplash makes it so that whip shots knockbacks can slam enemies into walls, dealing 50 extra damage. I'm putting this one in A tier as well. I think it's higher tier A, but it's just makes whip shot that much more threatening, and the amount of burst damage when you start playing around this perk properly, it's really noticeable. It can really be felt. Rapid Construction makes it so that Healing Pylon builds 300% faster and its cooldown is reduced by 1.5 seconds. I'd say this one's pretty good. I'm gonna put it in mid. I think it's in the higher tier of mid, but I think this perk's pretty nice, and the cooldown reduction's awesome, but the build time just lets you relocate that much more often, which is really something you already kind of struggled at before, so I think this one helps her out quite a lot. Summer Solstice makes it so that activating Captive Sun grants Yari 3 extra seconds of flight, 25% increased attack speed, flight speed, and 30% increased attack speed. This is pretty okay. I'm gonna put it in mid. It's on the lower tier of mid. The extra flight is nice. The flight speed is nice. It's all nice, but it's not super impactful, because a lot of the time when I find myself ulting as a Yari, I kind of just want to shoot it and then go back down. And also, I find a lot of the time I'll want to use my outburst, but because I'm in ult, I actually can't, and this just is 3 extra seconds of not being able to use the ability, which a lot of the time is really quite scary, honestly. Solar Power makes it so that fully charged solar rifle hits grant 12.5 of your maximum solar energy, overfilling up to 50%. I'm gonna put this one in mid as well, which feels weird. It's on the lower end of mid for sure, because a lot of the time, Yari wants to be on an off angle anyway, so a lot of the time I find myself having a lot of my charge and my healing available anyway, so having some extra bits of it that I'm usually going to be on an off angle away from my teammates and not actually able to get value out of, it kind of just feels random and not very helpful at all. Sunburn makes it so that Outburst ignites enemies, dealing an additional 70 damage over 3 seconds. This one is really quite strong. I'm putting this one in A tier because it makes going on a Yari so much more oppressive, and it gives her so much more burst damage available to her. The amount of times I hit like a bunch of enemies with this, and that's a lot of damage, or even if I'm just in a 1v1, a lot of times you can boop them away and follow it up with a quick headshot, and if you hit that combo, like, they're going to be really low, and just one more tap to them will often just kill them. So it makes 1v1ing Yari a lot harder and a lot scarier, and really just gives her more burst damage available to her. Familiar Vitals makes it so that Pulsar torpedoes lock onto allies 35% faster. I'm putting this one in A tier. I think it's a high tier A tier, but locking onto your allies for healing just lets you, a lot of the time I'm always sus about like switching to my torpedoes when I'm like healing someone. I'm like, oh no, if I switch to the missile, like, yeah, getting the burst healing on them would be nice, but are they going to live long enough for me to actually have it lock on? This just makes that happen a lot faster. So I find it's a lot more useful, and I'm going to put it in A tier. Hyper Boost makes it so that when you use Glide Boost, you pass through a hyper ring, it kind of pushes you forward. Chuno already has a ton of movement, and so for that reason, I'm going to put it in mid, just because also a lot of the time you don't really want to use the two abilities in tandem. You kind of want to go through the ring and then later end up using your Glide Boost, right? So having to stack both your abilities, like the burst of speed is nice and it's helpful sometimes. A lot of the time it's kind of just you're wasting your abilities, I find. Master Blaster makes it so that the Medi Blaster can crit enemies. I'm going to put this one in A tier. It's really quite strong and makes her 1v1 potential a lot scarier, and makes it a lot more oppressive to fight her. doesn't help too much because a lot of the time this isn't really what you want to be doing. But on the when an off flanker comes on you, it makes it a little bit more, it makes your gun have a little bit more punch, right? Lastly, reboots, it makes it so that when you activate glide boost, it resets your double jump, and then they just buffed it so that it also increases the duration of your glide boost by 25%. This is a perk that I frankly underrated pretty heavily, and I'm going to put it in broken because it's kind of funny that the reason, like, I think this perk is better than Master Blaster, and it got buffed. And I think that's not because it was worse, but because Master Blaster is just so popular because it's fun to be able to crit enemies, right? So I think this one got buffed for really wrong reasons. Like being able to just double jump and then boost and then jump again lets you take some really crazy high grounds and find higher angles to send out a lot of missiles, which is really what Juno wants to be doing. So this perk's kind of funny. Urgent Care makes it so that the healing of Fudo projectile speed is increased by 50% when seeking critical health allies. I'm going to put this one in mid tier. I don't think it's awful, but I don't think it comes up super often. And a lot of the time, just standing closer to your crit health allies is going to get them there faster anyway. And that's more useful than having them fly like just a little bit faster. Fortune Teller makes it so that kunai hits launch 2 healing of Fudo to an ally in front of you. I'm going to put this one in A tier. I think it's lower tier A, if not high tier mid. But being able to just up your healing output when you're already firing at a tempo like kunai heal, it just is that much more extra healing, which is it's nice. Shuffling makes it so the swift step can be used again within 4 seconds of initial cast. This is really, really strong. Not only is it useful when you're being dove and you're trying to dodge, but it's also nice. Sometimes I just find myself, I'll TP to my tank, Suzu them, TP away, and a lot of the times that's really all you kind of need to do. This perk is just very flexible and really lets Kiri be a lot more aggressive and catch just unorthodox with her TP usage. So I'm gonna put it in broken. I'd say it's probably on the bottom tier of broken, but I think this one's really, really strong. And then lastly, we have Foxtrot, which makes it so that Suzu grants 40% movement speed to allies for 2 seconds. 40% move speed is not insignificant, so we're going to put it in A tier. A lot of the time you're Suzuing people defensively when they want to run away, so it's not super useful for that reason, but it does let you be a little bit more flexible with it. And it is funny, just Suzuing yourself coming out of spawn for that little bit of extra movement speed so you get back to the fight faster. It just makes your Suzu a lot more flexible. Cleansing Grip makes it so that Life Grip cleanses negative effects. I'm gonna put this one in mid. It's niche, and in comps where it's good, or in comps again, I guess not really in comps where it's good, but against comps where it's good, it's really good. But I find that's just pretty niche, and there aren't that many debuffs in the game, so I'm gonna only put this one in mid. Life Cycle makes it so that while Lifeweaver is alive, you regenerate 10 health per second, and upon death, you drop a healing seed that heals allies for 250 health. Honestly, I'm gonna put this one in A tier. I think just a passive 10 extra HP is nice, but the healing seed is also really, really cool too. I find a lot of situations where as tank or even as my other support, I'll watch my Weaver die after trying to save them, and then I'll get turned on and I'll start being attacked, and then I can just go pick up the seed and I'm full again, right? It's honestly quite nice. Life Weaving makes it so that the Rejuvenating Dash adds 30 healing to my next Healing Blossom within 3 seconds. Life Dash or Rejuvenating Dash is not on a really long cooldown, so this is just an extra burst of healing every few seconds. So it's pretty nice. It's not super amazing. I'm gonna put it in mid. I'm gonna put it on the higher end of mid, close to A tier. But I think this one's pretty solid, and it really does up his healing output. Super Bloom makes it so that Thorns detonate for 40 extra damage when enough stick within 2.5 seconds. I'm going to put this one in mid as well. I think it's on the lower end of mid. It's nice when it's nice, but it's really just not what Lifeweaver wants to do. It does make him a little bit harder to dive and lets him put up a little bit more defense, but if you find yourself having to shoot a lot, you might just be positioning poorly. Base Blowout makes it so that Soundwave's knockback is increased by 15%. I'm gonna put this one in S tier. I think Lucio Boop has always. I feel like since Overwatch 2, it's kind of gotten underrated, but in reality, I still think it's really strong. And this coming online as a minor perk, just if an extra 15% increase in knockback is a lot. That is a lot for a character that also is going to be getting that minor perk really fast. Grooven makes it so you regenerate 4 ammo per second while wall riding. I'm gonna put this one in mid and definitely towards the lower end of mid. It's just not very helpful. Noise violation makes it so that crossfade's range is increased by 150% while amp is active. This one's pretty good. I'm gonna put it in A. Being able to heal or speed boost your allies from that much further away really just opens up the flexibility for Lucio and lets you just peel from people or even speed them from much further away, which is really quite nice actually. And then lastly, we have Accelerando, which makes it so that Lucio's attack speed is increased by 50% while amp up is active. I think this one's mid, probably towards the higher end of mid, but the increase in speed is definitely noticeable, but it also kind of messes with your aim if you're not super used to it, so I don't find it super great. Angelic Recovery makes it so that Mercy receives 15 health per second while the staff is attached to a full health ally. This one's pretty nice and makes it so that she's much harder to kill, and a lot of the time when you're being dove and you're not really, you're the one being focused, so a lot of the time you're going to be able to put your beam on a full HP target pretty easily anyway, which is just some extra HP to make it harder for them to kill you. So I'm going to put this one in A. Winged Reach makes it so that Guardian Angel's range is increased by 30%. Another one that makes Mercy a lot harder to kill and more slippery because you can just kite and go further distances when you're being dove and attacked. I'm going to also put this one in A. Chain Boost makes it so that secondary fire links to a second nearby ally. I'm putting this one in A as well. Damage boost is really what Mercy's most shines at the most, and while it's kind of weird because a lot of times you aren't going to be having two DPS that are standing close to each other, even just having like one damage boost go onto a DPS and the other go onto the tank is still pretty strong, because at the end of the day damage boost is what the most important part of Mercy's kit. And lastly, we have Flash Heal, which makes it so that Resurrect can be used on your active target to restore 150 health. Doing so incurs a 15-second cooldown. This one's really strong. Funnily enough, I'm also going to put it in A tier. I think this perk's really nice, and giving burst heals to a character that doesn't, that's always been one of Mercy's biggest weaknesses, makes for adding some depth to her kit, and also something that requires a fair amount of skill to actively be using well. So I'm putting that one there. Moira's first minor perk is Vanish, making it so the fade duration is increased by 0.5 seconds. I'm putting this one in Broken. I think this is another contender for one of the best perks in the game. This lets Moira be so much more slippery and hard to track down, and lets her just be so much more aggressive with the way she positions. So definitely going to put that one Broken. Uprush makes it so that Fade's jump height is increased by 50%. I'm going to put this one in mid. I think there are some maps where it's much better than others, but I find a lot of the time it's just not that helpful, because a lot of the time you're just trying to run to a health pack, and yeah, sometimes it helps you escape like a dive, but not super often, I find. Ethical Nourishment makes it so that Biotic Orb's first 50 healing is instant on each ally it encounters. I'm gonna put this one in A tier as well. Like I mentioned earlier, giving burst heals to a character that doesn't previously have them really changes their kit quite a lot and gives them more depth. And this is a very good example of that. And it also works for yourself too. So having burst healing and then being able to go to right clicking and life stealing is really, really quite strong. Contamination makes it so that enemies being damaged by Biotic Orb receive 25% reduced healing. I'm gonna put this one in A tier. There are a lot of comps where this is really, really strong, and then there are a lot of comps where it's not very good. But, following up right clicks with mouse 2s and being able to debuff targets and the insane amount of healing in Overwatch, there are a lot of instances where this is really strong. So we're gonna put it in A. Zenith Kick makes it so that Snap Kick's knockback distance is increased by 30%. I think the snap kick is already insane, so we're going to put this one in A tier because it just makes it even that much more distance between you and the target that's diving you. And, once you get used to the range, it makes it, even easier to follow up with headshots. So snap kicks, or Zenith Kick, really, really good. Ascendance makes it so that you can activate and hold double jump to hover for up to 3 seconds. I think this one's pretty overrated. I think there are situations where it's nice and it can be good to help kites, but a lot of the time you just go from a Zen that's dying on the ground to a Zen that's dying slightly above the ground. Focus Destruction makes it so the secondary fire charges 20% extra faster and can store 1 extra orb of destruction. This one's pretty good, and a lot of the time I find the nice part of this is really just the faster charge rate, which increases your DPS. But the extra orb is nice too, because it's just, 1 extra projectile that can headshot and spam and, damage, right? So Duality makes it so that Zenyatta's Orb of Harmony heals targets for 20% of his damage dealt to Orb of Discord targets. I think this one's good, and again, and for a similar reason as some of the other ones, because it gives burst healing to a character that didn't have it previously, right? Like, unfortunately, it's only the Orb of Discord targets, but it's still nice, and there are definitely situations where you can really notice the HP trade when you have like your Harmony Orb on your tank and the Orb of Discord on the enemy tank, and you're kind of just pelting them, right? Like the HP trade is really quite noticeable. Okay, so I'm realizing I forgot Freya, so my bad, Freya. So here's Freya now. Firstly, we have Frost Bolts, which makes it so that enemies hit by 3 regular bolts in quick succession are slowed by 20% for 2 seconds. Honestly, I'm gonna put this one in broken. I'd say it's close to A tier, but I'm gonna put it out in broken just because her gun fires so fast, and having a 20% slow that is as easy to apply as this one on a character that doesn't really have a slow in their kit, also on a minor perk, and makes it so that right clicks are easier to follow up on and that sort of thing, and it's harder to like dive her. I think this one ends up being really quite strong. Tracking Instinct makes it so that crit health enemies are revealed to you. I'm gonna put this one in A. I'm gonna say it's on the lower tier of A, but I'm gonna put it in A just because a lot of the time I'll find myself knocking an enemy to low HP and they're able to just like slightly break line of sight, but being able to see which way they're moving out of the cover and track that easier makes it a lot easier to follow up, and then also you can ping the crit health allies or enemies to your allies and let them have wall hacks too, which is always really nice. Ready to Hunt makes it so that Updraft grants a temporary free use of Quick Dash. I'm going to put this one in A tier as well, because not only is more movement always nice, an extra Quick Dash is also an extra use of your right click, basically, so that just gives her that much more burst damage available to her. And last but not least, we have Relentless Barrage, which, funnily enough, I'm also going to put in A tier because direct hits with Take Aim refund 4 automatic bolt ammo. If you are cycling your abilities correctly and you're shooting at the right tempo and you're using your right clicks when you should be, this essentially gives you infinite ammo, right? Like, I don't think in practice it's going to end up like that all the time, or really a lot of the time, but in theory it does, and that can't be understated.